This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And, Doug, we've been talking on and off about, care and how do you get care. But one of the things we haven't really talked about is that elephant in the room, the cost of care. And,
Right.
For the layperson who has no idea, and now either they need the support themselves or their family now comes to you and says, we need somebody. And you describe to them what you can do, which are great services, but they look at you when they hear a dollar figure, no matter what that is. It could be $1, it could be $1 million, and it
Yeah.
still feels like too much. So let's talk about what costs and why costs are going up. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, I think we all know that costs are going up.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it's a big concern, especially we're a company that's mission based. So one of my goals has always been to be as affordable as possible. So we don't really like make a killing or whatever on what we do. It's really been to kind of try to figure out how to provide the care and make it affordable and to, take care of people. I mean, that's ultimately what we have been after as a company. And I've seen. I started the company 15 years ago. As a matter of fact, this is kind of the anniversary right around now. It was around March, April of 2009 that I was working on, and then eventually opened the doors in April of that year. And so when I was doing the kind of the model, one of the things I worked on is how can I bring something that would be as least expensive as possible to people, but ethically do what I felt was right. And what I mean by that is have a great structure, pay the workers, a decent wage, a living wage, provide benefits where we could, do the type of care that is quality care, so which involves training and other things, and all of that is like, as I was starting, is thinking not only at that point in time, but down the road, how do we build these things? Because and how do we constantly improve in what we do? And it's interesting because for many years, we were, relatively within the bounds of what we had originally started out at. And, there was modest increases, $1 here or there, like over an extended period of time. But something happened right around the time of COVID, and has accelerated, since that. And that is, as you mentioned, inflation went through the roof. And so, things like insurance costs has doubled,
Right.
The cost on what we pay our staff has increased significantly. Healthcare costs, because we offer health benefits, have increased, significantly. So, it's not unusual for those costs, for each particular item to have gone up by 50% or 100%, and so that those costs can't be absorbed. There isn't that type of a cushion involved in, because we didn't build in a cushion in the first place for doing it, because we're trying to pass on whatever savings that we have to our clients. So we're still doing things that, to be able to save, for example, when you use a credit card, a lot of people don't realize this unless you go to a restaurant, and then you realize, a lot of the restaurants are now giving a discount, if you
Right.
if you pay cash, or better yet, not a discount. What they're doing is they're increasing the price, if you're doing credit card.
Right.
And so we've moved over to kind of like a system that is really efficient, which is by doing ACH. It actually is convenient for the client, and then we don't have all the fees. We have some fees, but not the fees like you do with a credit card. And so we're doing many of those things that will help to allow services to be as cost effective as we possibly can. But those costs are, that we have, as I mentioned before, with things like insurances and with, the cost of rent, for heaven's sake, all of those things have significantly increased. And so that money then has to be recovered. And it's not only the cost of labor going out to do the actual work, but because we are taking supervisory responsibility, the costs of the within the company or within the office, not the company, within the office, has also increased. You have to pay people more for things, and that's on a twofold. One is demand, what people can demand based on what the market is. But the second thing is to be fair to our people so that they keep up with the costs and stuff. So inflation is a cruel taskmaster. I mean, as far as and this is why if I hope the Fed can slowly pull us out of the mess that we're in. Unfortunately, when the government spends like drunken sailors, eventually it's going to come back, and it's going to become inflation. And so if you're going to put pressure on folks, if you want to kind of see stabilization, we have to pressure our folks and our representatives in government to stop this. And I am not in any way ever wanting to get into politics with the podcast, but I do think that I don't care if you're on the right or the left, we can say this is stupid.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and when you're going for services that you provide, many of us don't understand the training that goes behind it. Okay.
Right.
We think that, there's going to be this person coming into the house. She can't get any other job, so she's going to sort of be babysitting my loved one. And maybe, we're going to ask her to run the vacuum cleaner. Maybe we're going to ask her to help prep a meal. But we're not asking that person to do anything that is rocket science. So we think in the back of our heads, why should it cost us X amount of money?
Right.
The thing I can tell our listeners, but what I know about your staff is that the more they are trained, the more they understand how to work with the client, the happier they are to be working. And the happier the client is, because they don't have somebody saying, oh, that's not my job.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, so So if someone, just hires a private individual, what they don't have is they don't have the resources that we do. They don't have the nurse that, is very involved in, making sure that complicated clients are getting the care that they need. And you never know when a simple client is going to become a complicated
Right,
client. And
exactly.
as a matter of fact, how do we prepare or try to prevent a simple client from becoming complicated? Something as simple as having someone on call, you know, um, that if you have a problem, it's in the evening, you can call and you can reach a real human being that actually works for our company, that can help you with an issue. And the so it that costs money, so nursing, on call, triaging issues, and HR staff, we're providing benefits for our folks. So they're not just hanging out there. We have to work with things like um, workers' comp, so that, and those things are all important because, you want someone who has workers' comp. You don't want to be the one that is liable if something goes on. You want
Exactly.
the liability to be within the company that you've hired. That's why you're hiring a professional company, professional caregivers. That takes effort to not only secure those folks, but also to train those folks, to get them so that they have the skill sets that we feel is necessary for doing the type of care that someone is having. Someone who's supervisor. I was just talking to one of my directors, and she today, and um, she was talking to me about the amount of work that she's doing in working with um, our caregivers on issues, so that we're correcting things so they don't become a problem,
Sure.
or so that we nip a problem in before it becomes a bigger problem. And all of those things end up um, having an impact on cost, obviously, because you have to have the support staff for that, the schedules, making sure everything is working, um, but also so that we are preventing issues or problems or other things. And again, that's why it's important to hire an organization. So, I will say that, Medicare recently had a ruling, and all of this sounds like really wonderful until you live in the real world. Excuse me, not Medicare, Medicaid. Medicaid said, look at, you know, we're coming up with this rule that 80% of all the costs or all the payment has to go into salary. Well, the reality is if you're offering these other factors that are involved, they're not including those things. They're
Sure.
not including scheduling and someone moving into overtime, getting into overtime, and the costs that can be involved in that, and HR being involved in making sure that everything is going, and educational programs and all of that stuff. So they're not saying, oh, 20% can go into profit. They're saying that that no, 20% is to pay all of those costs. Well, I can tell you all those costs are not going to be 20%
Right.
in a good
Right.
organization. They're going to be higher than in most cases. And so basically they're saying we want you to operate at a loss. Now, that's not in the area that we operate in, and so I feel very free to comment about that. But I can say that no sane organization is going to get involved in it if that actually goes through. you will basically have care disappear,
Yeah.
or the most, some of the most vulnerable of our society. And so, it's a simple way of destroying something that is hard to fill in the first place.
So I know you don't accept insurance or Medicaid. Your private pay, correct?
Yeah, so that's not completely true.
Okay.
Don't accept Medicaid. We do accept VA, and
Okay.
VA is actually good with their reimbursement. And we do accept, or we assist with people who have long-term care insurance.
Okay.
So now Medicare really does not pay
Right.
for the services that we do. So, when Medicare is involved, and that's all you have, you can pretty much write off that you're going to get much, if anything. Now, unless you've had some sort of an acute episode where you're getting care afterwards. Sometimes they'll cover something like a shower a couple times a week. Some of the Advantage plans do say that they offer some services for aides assisting, and in practicality, I'm not seeing that done very often.
Right.
So it's in effect, it's really not having very much impact at all, for whatever minor services they do, unless you're immediately coming after, and that's just a handful of hours, which can be helpful, getting a shower or some
Sure.
things like that immediately after being released from rehab is definitely a good thing, for that. But that typically that might last 4 to 6 weeks um, in those circumstances. So
So, but the difference I see in your services compared to some others that are taking Medicaid and other, plans, your service just feels and acts very professional. I've met some of your staff in the past, and they come across as they're the people that I want in my home. I want them to take care of me. They know
yeah,
what they're doing, and if they're not sure, they know how to pick up a phone and ask for help. And I
yeah,
think we talked about this before when my mother was ill. Most of our staff was good, but a couple of agencies we worked with for nighttime, it was absolutely horrible. They sent us anybody who could breathe.
yeah,
And we were still paying high prices for that out of our pocket. And
right,
my comment is, if you're going to find somebody to come in and take care of you, your spouse, your loved one, find someone who actually knows what they're doing and wants to do the job. They're not there because, they've got to make extra money tonight, and then they fall asleep in a chair while your loved one needs help.
right. Well, and I will say this is that the we spend a lot of time in the interviewing process trying to get the right people, and pickings are slim right now. I mean, there's the uh, the amount of care that's needed compared to the pool of caregivers willing to do it, or potential employees willing to do it, is extremely low right now. The ratio is not the proper ratio.
Wow.
And again, that's added to the cost. That's what I was saying before about demand. Um, because you want to get good people. And we really as a society have to figure this out. And it's not going to be a single pronged approach. People have to, I think, unfortunately, get used to viewing things instead of being, like what cost is, it has to be what is the value. And I know I've talked about this before, but it's absolutely essential that we start viewing things out of the value that it's going to bring. And then, for those who are hurting or falling through the cracks, trying to figure out how we can help those individuals. Because the value proposition is really important, and I'll kind of explain it. If you can keep someone out of the hospital, let's say, having someone go in, 3 times a week, and whatever the cost would be for that, you have to say, is that worth ultimately keeping someone out of the hospital? So let's say that, a handful of hours, three days a week, is ends up being, you know, $400 or $500, depending on part of the country that you're in, per week, is because that person is in, and because someone is on able to take their meds or other things like that, is that going to save that person in the end more money, but even more importantly, the quality of life? Or, another way of looking at it is, the cost of being in a hospital and the copays and the other things that could be involved in if you prevent that. Or if someone doesn't take their medicine right and they end up having a stroke, and then your costs are going to be significantly higher, whether it means putting that person into a nursing home or having a lot more care that's involved with having an organization like ours come in and maybe give 24 hours a day. So, and that's where, again, I think it's really important in who you pick as the company that is doing the providing. Because a good company doing the providing, if you should walk away from a meeting with the individuals that you have. And I know that I'm speaking to an audience that's bigger than the scope that
Sure.
the area that we cover. And the one thing I can say is you should walk away and not feel like you've been sold something, that someone has looked at your care and said, how can we do this in a way that is as cost effective as possible? Or do you feel like they're adding hours here or there? And the best way, and I know I've used this illustration probably in a past podcast, but when you walk into your doctor's, generally speaking, when you walk away, you are feeling like that doctor, he or she, has had my best interest in mind. They're not trying to talk me into a procedure or into different things or try to rack it up. They were really looking out at my best interests, and I trust their judgment, and that they're trying to do what's right under these circumstances. And you should have and if you have a doctor that you feel differently about, you should run,
Right.
not walk away from that office. And there are doctors that are, unscrupulous and will be trying to sell you or trying to get you certain things. But the vast majority of doctors have built in through their training to do the right thing for the individual that they're caring for, and not to be kind of nickel and diming and adding on costs, because they know that that's going to negatively impact the individual. And so you should get a very similar feeling when you're interacting with someone from a company that is, or an agency that is providing this. They should have that same passion, that same zeal to do the right thing. And if you do the right thing enough times, um, you'll end up being profitable, because, and just like a doctor's office, you have the a good business model, so you'll end up doing okay, from a financial standpoint, because you have the right structure in place. But your focus always is what is right for this individual. How can I save them money and stuff? So and I think that ultimately will, because if they're focusing on bringing value, but focusing on in the sense that I meant before, which is preventing issues, preventing problems, helping you enough so that you're not going to have, bigger issues, or your parents are not going to have bigger issues, that you're going to be on the right track with that.
I think it's interesting when we have children or when we're preparing to have children, we look for the best doctors, we start looking for daycare centers, all these things that are going to help us with our child.
Yeah.
Yet we don't want to plan, most of us, for as we get older. And so I know I spent thousands of dollars on daycare for my son because I was working and my husband was working. And we found the best places that we knew that he was getting nurtured, so that when we picked him up, we weren't hearing horror stories.
Right.
And I've been very lucky. I've been able to sit down with my sons and tell them what we need, and they know what their responsibility is going to be. I'm not telling them that they're going to necessarily be taking care of me physically, but they know what the plans are. They saw what I did for my parents. We have to have these conversations.
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to contact an office like yours and start gathering the information, because you never know when that one illness is going to hit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's and we did talk about this in one of the podcasts, but the fact is, it is so rare that people are looking before there's a problem.
Yep.
Usually it's when they're in the midst of a crisis, which is a terrible time to make a decision. I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, unfortunately, most of us operate on this need to know basis. I'll learn that if I need to know it, and most people, very few people, they come up to Medicare and that they're like thinking a lot about it before Medicare hits. It's like 2 months before, oh, I have to be signing up for this
Yeah.
thing. And gosh, there's all these plans. I'll just pick this one. And, what's A, B, C, D, whatever, the alphabet of Medicare. And then all of a sudden they get hit by something and they don't realize, oh, I should have gotten that at the time of retirement. I should have gone for a supplement and not for the Advantage plan, or I'm financially wiped out because I didn't realize I should get a supplement or the Advantage plan.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden I'm responsible for 20% of this. And a lot of times that happens just because you didn't take the time in advance to think through and make the decisions. And I do recommend it, make a phone call, at least know the companies that have a good reputation, speak to someone in the company, get a feel for things, meet. And, I highly recommend someone, just getting a handful of hours a week for someone as they get older, get used to have someone in, you know, the cost is so minimal compared to the benefit
Sure.
of being able to have a company that knows you and that you know them and you're feeling comfortable with it. And so if all of a sudden something big happens, you can increase that, do it.
Right.
So yeah, and do it with confidence that yeah, I like this company. I trust this company and what they're doing. So
Well, I appreciate you doing this podcast and letting people, like you said, outside our area know that there are good companies out there. These are the things that we should be looking for. And, I've learned a lot, and the people that contact us keep asking the same question. Well, I'm only 40. Should I be looking? Well, not only should you be looking for yourself, but what about your parents? What
yeah,
about other people in your family? And it's like, oh, I wasn't thinking about them at the time. I was just thinking about me. And
yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah, I would say, if we were going to do a timeline for things, and we'll maybe wrap up with this, in your 40s, you should probably be thinking, should I get or long-term care insurance? Should I build that into it? Because, you know, none of us are going to get out of this world without getting care. I mean, unless you're one in a million, whether that's home care or care in a facility or whatever, it's going to happen. So you do need to start rethinking about things. Now, I will also say that between, if someone's 40 now, um, and most of the time we're not doing care for most people unless there's something extraordinary
Sure.
until they're in their 70s or 80s. And so, over 40 years, the landscape is going to change.
Sure.
But the one thing that I think you do have to think about is, how will I afford it? If I were to look at things right now and then expect inflation, how will I afford care when it comes to my needs, in that case? But then, like you said, family needs and other things. But anyway, my, so often the reality of what I do in the podcast happens because of an interaction or because of something that I realize that people need to know. And so I hope that with these podcasts that there's a nugget, there's something that people take away, that take the time to watch it, that makes them think, okay, maybe I'll do this a little bit differently, or maybe I'll have a different perspective. So
Sounds
thanks.
good to me. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. And we're not going to meet until next month. So in between, happy Easter to those who celebrate. I'm waiting for the Easter Bunny to bring me some good chocolate.
Hey, I have a question for you
Yeah,
before you leave.
sure.
Just real quickly. Now, you're doing your own thing with coaching now,
Right,
right?
right.
Can you give me in like a 2-minute nutshell what you do?
So I'm helping, mostly my client base is 50 and up, and helping those individuals, you know, make the changes that they need to make for themselves, not that they made for their parents or their spouse or their kids. And I'm not saying, and I hope people understand this, I'm not telling you that you're going to make changes and split off from everybody. But too many individuals get to that point of their life, and it's like, what else is there for me? There's a lot. And I've been down that road, and I didn't do it at 50. I did it in my 60s, and I'm so glad I did. Um, so I want people to know there are opportunities out there. I also help people understand some of the things that we talk about here on this podcast. We got to think ahead. Yes, we're very healthy right now. Our spouse may be healthy, but let's look ahead. Okay. Let's start to plan so that it doesn't kick us in the gut. Okay.
Right.
And one real quick example is a couple weeks ago, my husband started feeling dizzy. He tried getting into an ENT, couldn't get into one for 4 months.
Mm.
He freaked out. He got through to his regular practitioner, went in, didn't see anything in his ears. He listened to his carotid artery and got hysterical almost in the office and said, "You've got to go for an ultrasound immediately." Took 2 weeks to get him for the ultrasound. I was already preparing that my husband was going to have surgery. He was going to be laid up according to all the documentation for 6 weeks. How are we going to get through this? But instead of panicking, I stopped and I said, I don't know anything yet, but these are the things I can put in place. This is what I can do. I may have to call on other people to do some things. So your phone number was right at the top there. But
I'm
he
glad I
ended,
didn't get a
he
call.
ended up having the test, and it's like, no, it's not your carotid artery at all. We don't know what it is. Oh, it's probably this medication. They took him off of it. He's no longer dizzy. Okay. But I want people to understand that there are options out there, but we have to ask, we have to look. But sometimes we need that support system, that coach who says, okay, you can take a deep breath. Okay.
To
I'm
help
going
with
to
this
show
change.
you these opportunities, but you're going to choose which one you want to take. I'm
Yeah.
not going to tell you. So I don't provide therapy, but I've had help people stay in their jobs when they thought it was their job that was making them unhappy. And it wasn't. It was
Yeah.
totally something else. So if anybody's out there and, just wants that support, I have to tell you, I work with 2 coaches myself because
Good.
I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm still going to strive for it.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thank you for reviewing
Sure.
that. I'm sure there are people out there that may definitely have an interest in our audience for what you're doing. So
Well,
thank you.
you're very welcome. And
All
I'll
right.
see you next month. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.